So I guess the question to ask is what happened? I mean, at least at the national level, with the schools, the seminaries, the mega churches, the Christian artists, parachurch organizations, we seem to have a serious problem. I mean, a real disaster going on. And the question is who influenced who? Is this the result of is this a top-down problem coming from these institutions into the church, or is there a systemic problem inside the church body as a whole at the local church level? So, in order to try to address this issue and maybe offer some remedies here at the end, I want to just take some time to go through the qualifications for church leadership, at least at the local church level, and then begin to ask ourselves to basically take our temperature and ask us, how are we doing? I mean, are we the victims of these national, events, or are these national events a result of us? So I want to take some time here to kind of look through these qualifications, and then it's going to be a bit of time going through this, and then at the end of it, ask ourselves, where we're at, and then see what it is, if anything, that we need to do. So without saying much about that, let's just get straight into the passages themselves, and we'll start doing a word study. And the word study, it's just going to be a simple word study. You can go online and do it. It's done through Blue Letter Bible. I've done this so that you can actually go and look yourself. It's done through Blue Letter Bible. I use the King James version of the Bible because that is the predominant Bible by which Christianity was brought to the world, at least in the West. And I also use Noah Webster's 1888 or 1828 online dictionary so that we can understand the words that were actually used in our King James Bibles. So that's why I use those definitions. And so let's just get into the passages and then start breaking these down. All right, so here's the first passage we're going to look at. I put the certain words in yellow because these words are repeated in almost the exact same way in the other passage, and so we don't want to be looking at all these words twice if we don't need to. So, but here's the first passage. Titus, he's told this, for this cause I left thee in Crete, that thou shouldest set in order the things that are wanting, and ordain elders, key word there, in every city, as I have appointed thee, if any be blameless, the husband of one wife, and having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. For a bishop, okay, that's a key word, must be blameless as the steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre, but a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and convince the gainsayers. So you can see right here that there are two words for the type of person that's being appointed. One is elder, and that tells us something about the person themselves. And then the other word is the word bishop, which is basically a designated office that that person actually fills. Let's go to the next passage here. 1 Timothy 3:1-7, for this is a true saying, if any man desire the office of a bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach, not given to wine, nor striker, nor greedy of filthy lucre, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that rules his own house well, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into the reproach and the snare of the devil. So let's just stop here for just a second, and I want to talk about the idea of what a bishop and an elder actually are. The word elder, we get the word presbytos or petros from, and I think that there's been a big mistake with understanding this idea, because we get the word Presbyterian from it, and we tend to forget that the word itself is originally was associated with being an old person. Okay, it literally means elderly, older as a noun, a senior, specifically or especially in an Israelite Sanhedrin, also figuratively a member of the Celestial Council or a Christian presbyter. Elder, eldest are old, all right? And so I think the idea, it's pretty easy to see that the idea here is that this person who is considered to be an elder is a person who's actually elderly. They're actually old is what they are. And that comes from an idea that it does not originate with the church, which I'll get to here in just a moment. Here's the online biblical use of this: an elder of age, the elder of two people, advance in life, an elder, a senior, forefathers, a term of rank or office among the Jews, a member of the great council of the Sanhedrin, because in early times the rulers of the judges, the rulers of the people, judges, etc., were selected from elderly men, okay, of those who in separate cities managed public affairs and administrated justice. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, or in just a minute. Among the Christians, those who presided over the assemblies or churches. The New Testament uses the term bishop, elders, and presbyters interchangeably. The 24 members of the heavenly Sanhedrin are courts seated on thrones around the throne of God. All right, this is the online or the outline of biblical use as seen in our blue letter Bibles. So let's go to the next word here for bishop. The word bishop here is it's look at this comparative of presbos, elderly, older, as a noun, a senior, especially in the Israelite Sanhedrin, also figuratively a member of the Celestial Council, or a Christian presbyter. Elder, eldest are old, right? So I think this is pretty obvious that that the person who holds the office of a bishop, which is an overseer, is an elder, and that person as an elder is an old person, an elderly person, like a forefather of some sort. Okay, this is an old person holding the office of overseer or bishop. Again, here's the outline of biblical use. Bishop, investigation, inspection, and visitation. That act by which God looks into or searches out the ways, deeds, character of men in order to judge them their lot accordingly, whether joyous or sad. Oversight, a bishop, office, charge, the office of an elder, the overseer or presiding officers of a Christian church. And so the concept of a bishop or of an overseer, that's actually an office, but the person who actually occupies that office is an elder. Now, I don't have a lot of time to get into the history of all this, but I've spent some time studying the ancient Middle East, Mesopotamia, and the practices of the Bible lands. And one of the things that we actually see this reference in the scriptures where we talk about the elders sitting in the gates, all right? And this was a practice that was common all around the Middle East at the time, and even to this day still is, where you actually had men who were elderly men, and they were tasked with governing the affairs of the city. And these men made decisions, they judged cases, they even went so far as to determine who was allowed in and out of the city and what kind of businesses could actually be established there. And it's basically unthinkable to think that somebody like Skippy the skateboarder sat among these men, okay? That was not the case at all. And this was carried over into the New Testament period. You can see throughout the scriptures references to the elders, and Jesus even talks about the gates of hell, understanding this concept of those individuals, those councils that govern these local communities and so forth. Jesus borrows from that when he talks about the gates of hell shall not prevail. There's not going to be any council or anything that's going to prevail against the kingdom of heaven. And so what is being referenced here is when Paul comes along and he talks about appointing elders and bishops, he's borrowing from a very common concept that was known all over the world, and he's not reinventing the wheel here. He's just taking something that has worked for hundreds and hundreds, or actually thousands of years in our case, and you can see that he just borrows from that and he carries that over into the church, and he uses the same language. Elders. He doesn't change that and use that in a tongue-in-cheek fashion. It's the same concept, that these are elderly men walking among you who are gifted in ways that God would gift them for the express purpose of actually running the affairs of the church. And that's who these guys are. These aren't young guys walking around with slingshots in their back pocket. Okay? Not walking around with 2-year-olds in a crib or 3-year-olds or 5-year-olds and so forth like that. These are older men whose kids who have grown up and so forth, and they have a lifetime of experience behind them, and they're powerhouses in the Word. And we're going to see that here as we move throughout this study. So let's look at the word blameless. We're going to look at Timothy, the Titus section, and also the Timothy one as well, because they have two different words that are not completely different, but they're different enough that we need to compare them. So when we look at the word blameless, it means unaccused. By implication, they're irreproachable, blameless. When you look at the understanding, the definition of this, it's actually talking about being without fault, innocent, guiltless, not meriting censure. Irreproachable, an adjective and reproachable, that cannot be justly reproached. For free from blame, upright, innocent, and irreproachable life is the highest honor of a rational being. So the idea behind it is real simple, okay? There's nothing that you can grab hold of on these people that would actually bring the gospel message that they're teaching, they're preaching, they're modeling into ill repute, all right? In other words, people can't come to say, well, you did it, and you seem to be doing fine, all right? They don't have anything like that they can grab hold of, either in their background or in their current circumstances. When we talk about the background, we're not talking about before they're believers. We're talking about as believers. So here it is in 1 Timothy 3:2, the word blameless, with a little bit different word here. It means not arrested, by implication, inculpable. All right. Now I'm gonna spend some time on that word inculpable here. It's talking about action and inaction. In other words, with regard to whatever it is that they're dealing with, their actions themselves have to be done in such a way where they themselves are blameless and unrebukable. Or on the other end of the spectrum, it's their inaction. In other words, if they should have acted, or they promised that they would act, and they didn't act, then they themselves become blameless and rebukable. Okay, so they have to be above reproach with regard to their action and inaction. All right, you can't have a guy who knows what the right thing to do is and simply just doesn't do it and sits on his butt and hopes that whatever takes place eventually fixes the problem or the problem goes away. All right, okay, these people are judged based upon their actions and their inactions. And what we're talking about with regard to above reproach, you can't have someone come and say, well, you did it and you seem to be doing all right. All right, you can't have that. Again, we're talking about them as believers, not as unbelievers. So when biblically investigated, they are found to be above reproach. Not self-willed. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, this is one of the biggest problems in the church that there is. It's specifically with regard to church leadership. And there's not been one church that I've been involved in where this is not a pervasive problem, right? What does it say? I mean, the word is self-pleasing, arrogant, self-willed. These people rely on their own authority to make decisions as to what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. All right? They rely on one's own will, their obstinacy. Obstinately doing what one wants in spite of the wishes or orders of others. Okay? Not a control freak who has a their way or the highway approach. I remember a long time ago in a church that I was involved in, there was a vote to bring on a particular individual as an elder. And according to the church bylaws, the vote had to be unanimous. And when they didn't get a unanimous vote, they just simply turned around and changed the bylaws right there on the spot. And then they put forward the guy that they wanted to get through. This is actually fairly common, that a pastor or an elder or a deacon or an elder board has it in their head that they want to do something, and they have a pragmatic reason as to why they want to do it. And oftentimes the scriptures will speak against what it is that they're doing or the way that they're going about doing it. But they have this idea that, well, we're going to do the best we can with what we've got, not realizing that if God hadn't provided what they needed, that they shouldn't be doing it anyway. Okay? The scriptures makes it very clear that if we're going to compete, we have to for the prize, we have to compete according to the rules, otherwise we don't get the prize. All right? They can't ask people to bless their work if their work is not being done in accordance with God's word. And many times, I have run into pastors and elders and deacons and other church leaders who know that what they're doing isn't done in the way the Bible would not necessarily prescribe, but they take it, well, we have to work with what we've got approach. That is a self-willed individual. Okay? I don't care how sincere they are. If God isn't in it, and if we can't determine that through the scriptures, and we're going to go ahead and do it anyway, that is being self-willed. And the scripture says that they cannot be self-willed people. This is a real problem in the church. Not soon angry. I originally thought this was talking about just like an outburst of wrath and anger, and certainly that's part of it. But there's a word here, and I'm not sure I'm actually pronouncing this, irascible, soon angry. And I looked at that word, irascible, I believe that's what it's pronounced in, it's the quality of being, well, easily inflamed by anger, irritability of temper. Now, I'm just going to put this challenge to you, and you ask yourself this question. If you want to determine whether or not your pastor or your elder or whatever it is soon angry, or shall we say irritable, just watch what they do when they think that you're challenging them in their position or in their decisions. Watch how they respond to that. That's a pretty good indicator as to whether or not a guy is soon angry. Not given to wine, okay, or staying near wine, tippling, a toper, given to wine. Noah Webster, 1828, what tippling actually is, it's a habitual practice of drinking strong or spirituous liquors, a drinking to excess. The idea behind this is that these people are not known for their drinking, all right? What they are not known for is flaunting their Christian liberty in drinking. To be honest with you, I don't understand anybody who does that. The idea that somehow or another you think that you have to flaunt your Christian liberty in drinking, I just turn around and look at this and just say, this is a person who was given to wine, all right? It doesn't say they can't drink. It simply says that they're not known for their drinking. That's the idea. Not a striker. Okay. Again, this one kind of caught me by surprise because I thought this was talking specifically about a person who goes around punching people out, and certainly we don't want to have something like that. It's not a very big problem in the church, although I've heard of some incidents like this happening. But the idea tends to be more with regard to a verbal type of issue. All right, they're not pugnacious, or they're not quarrelsome. They're not a striker. The idea is a person who wounds others with their words. They will do anything to not concede a point, even to the wounding of a person. By nature, they are unapproachable and defensive. I've run into a lot of guys like this. Sometimes you just go up and you want to ask them a simple question, and instantly you see the shields going up. Okay, the scripture says you cannot have a person like this in leadership. Not given to filthy lucre. All right, the idea behind this is that these people engage in very ethical business practices. They cannot be engaged in businesses that are not commensurate with Christian activity. For instance, legally speaking, a liquor store is shall we say, a legal business within the context of our society. But is it commensurate with Christian practice? A massage parlor, as in the case of Ravi Zacharias, is a quote-unquote worldly legal business. But is it commensurate with the principles of Christian ethics? Okay, the optics of that and so forth. What are they going to tell us? So the idea behind it is that not every business that is legally operable, that can be legally operated in society, is commensurate with Christian practice. All right, and the idea behind this is that we do not want to be engaged in business practices that bring a reproach against the gospel itself. A lover of hospitality. All right, they are fond of guests, hospitable, given to, lover of, use, hospitality. Both he and his family love to have people over for the sake of it. They love company, and it should be plainly evident to all. Okay, I'm going to add on here. Not only do they have an open door policy where people feel free to walk in at any moment and drop by at any time, they themselves arrange to have people over. And they do so out of a sincere desire just to get to know who they are, for the express purpose of just getting to know who they are so that they can actually minister to them better. They love having people over. I can't stress this enough. They love having people over. A lover of good men, right? They are fond to good, a promoter of virtue, love of good men. They love the company of and promote other people who have demonstrated a lifelong example of godly behavior. They love being around the best among us. They're a lover of good men. The word sober, again, this is another one that caught me off guard when I first came across this a while back, thinking it had something to do with drinking and alcohol, but it's literally talking about being safe or sound in mind. They're self-controlled. They're moderate as to opinion or passion, discreet, sober, and temperate. Okay, and it doesn't mean that these people are mild or anything like that. Is that what it's talking about? That these are people who are well reasoned in their thinking, and they can communicate that. All right, look at Noah Webster, 1828 sound. All right, founded in truth, firm. Okay, not stubborn, but firm, strong. Okay, that means that they're it's very persuasive, valid. It's actually true, and it's solid. That cannot be overthrown or refuted as sound reasoning, a sound argument, a sound objection, sound doctrine, sound principles. Okay, look at number 9 here. Right, correct, well-founded, free from error, orthodox. And Noah Webster quotes this passage right here. Let my heart be sound in thy statutes. Okay, the implications for theological and apologetic aptitude would eliminate almost everyone sitting on today's elder boards. Okay, these are guys who, when you sit down and you interact with them, you talk with them, and you ask them questions, they can provide actual, sound, irrefutable arguments for why they believe what they believe. They don't come along and say, well, that's our teaching statement. They don't wave their teaching statement around. They don't wave a doctrinal statement around. They don't say, well, that's what we believe, or that's what we teach here. They don't come along and say, well, that's what I've always taught, and so forth. They don't come along and say, we're going to have to agree or disagree. Okay? They are capable of explaining why they believe what they believe and why they do what they do, and they explain it with arguments that cannot be refuted. Okay, they cannot be refuted, and they provide solid answers that you can grab hold of. The apologetic implications here are enormous. These people are very gifted, not only in doctrine, but apologetics as well. They're just. All right, this is real easy. They're equitable in character or act. All right, they work with people in a biblically equitable fashion, submitting themselves to God's word and God's laws in all issues of solving problems and issues that they may be involved in or might be brought to their attention. By implication, they're innocent, they're holy, absolutely or relatively, just, meet, righteous. Okay, in an evangelical sense, they're righteous, religious, influenced by a regard to the laws of God, or living in exact conformity to the divine will. All right. In other words, he is committed to doing God's work God's way. He's not a person who's going to come out and say things like, oh, things like being, so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. He's not going to go out there and call people, being legalistic for submitting themselves in the strictest sense to God's word. They fully recognize that the best way that you can actually love God and love your fellow man is to submit yourself exactly to what God has prescribed in his word. Okay, these people are just, and they demand for themselves and try and model for others a pattern of submitting yourself as firmly to God's word as possible in all matters. In addition to just, they're holy, undefiled by sin, free from wickedness, religiously observing every moral obligation, pure, holy, pious. I just want you to contemplate this in the online biblical use, okay? Religiously observing every moral obligation. To them, there is no such thing as being so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. To them, there is no such thing as legalism and a complete conformity to the holy standard. That's not legalism at all. In fact, our conformity to the holy standard, as seen in the scriptures, is the primary way by which we love not only God, but we also love our neighbor as ourselves. There isn't this holy standard over here, but we have to step out of it so we can come over here and love our neighbor and show mercy and compassion. The most merciful and compassionate thing you can do is to submit yourself to God's holy standard and also call them to that. And that's how these people think, and that's how they act, and that's who they are, and that's how they're known. Temperate, all right? Again, we're going to look at the online biblical use here. Strong, robust, having power over, possessed of a thing, mastering, controlling, curbing, restraining, controlling oneself, temperate, continent. All right, it's strong in the thing, masterful, figuratively and reflexively, self-controlled in appetite and temperate. Okay, these people they've got a lot of power over the flesh. Let's put it that way. And you know what? In today's world, I think that the best way to determine whether or not a person is temperate is get a look at their cell phone and their internet use and see what it is that they're actually looking at, what they've got power over and what they've got control over. Okay, these people have control over the flesh. They are not mastered by anything. I can't tell you how many times I hear people, even people in leadership circles, talk about, this besetting sin that they've got, they just can't get over. If you got an elder, who's talking about, who's even suggesting that there is such thing as besetting sins, you need to get rid of them, okay? Because this passage states that we should be able to have mastery over these things. Holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers. The word here means to hold oneself opposite to. Okay, in other words, they're standing in opposition to whoever these gainsayers are. By implication, to adhere to, by extension, to care for, hold fast, hold to, support. Noah Webster definition for hold fast: it's a noun, a thing that takes hold, a catch, a hook. Okay, and again, the theological and apologetic demands of this requirement would eliminate most men sitting on today's leadership boards. Look at what this says right here. It says that in holding fast the faithful word, that he may be able by sound doctrine. Okay, he's able to take sound doctrine and apply it in such a way that he exhorts and convinces the gainsayers. He holds fast sound doctrine. This is a presuppositional approach to explaining the scriptures. And in today's world, and in today's churches, and in churches that I have been involved in, I've heard multiple times people tell me or say or teach or promote the idea that somehow or another apologetics doesn't have any role in, shall we say, in discipleship, doesn't have any role in terms of actually presenting the gospel, and doesn't have any role in convincing people who are opposing the gospel itself. But this passage says that by sound doctrine, you can exhort and convince the gainsayers. The apologetic demands of this passage is staggering. Okay, and what this passage is telling us is that the men who are elders in the church are supposed to be so capable in the word and in the doctrines that come out of that word that they are able to take those doctrines and use them in arguments, not only to exhort, and the word exhort means to excite them to be excited about it and to embrace something. Not only do they exhort the gainsayers, they convince the gainsayers. All right? Apologetics plays a major role in the role of an elder. Okay? A major role. I would ask you to basically just examine the people who you have sitting on your elder boards and ask you what their apologetic acumen actually is. Okay? Are these people who are gifted in sound reasoning and sound doctrine? That's what this passage requires. It requires that they be gifted in sound reasoning and sound doctrine. And I'm telling you, folks, my experience, kid, is that most people would not be able to live up to this. Most people sitting on your elder boards would not be able to live up to this. Vigilant. This is another surprise word for me. it means sober. Okay, either figuratively or circumspect, to be sober. The idea behind it is that this is an individual who is either, shall we say, mentally aware of their surroundings in terms of actually where they're at and what's going on around them. But in addition to that, they're spiritually aware of their surroundings. Okay? They are so in touch with God's word that they are capable of being able to have a 360 degree view, 365 days a year, 24 hours, 7 days a week. Okay, these people are constantly watching all the way around. They are circumspect in all things. That's why it says that they're sober, they're temperate, abstaining from wine, either entirely or at least from its immoderate use of things, free from all wine, or as vessels offerings. Okay, so these people, they are not, well, first of all, they are not under the control of any substance. Okay, there's no drug that they're under the control of, nicotine. They're not under control of wine or anything. So they have no substance abuse issues whatsoever. Nothing that could impair their reasoning abilities. But spiritually speaking, it's also the same. They're not drunk with money. They're not drunk with power or authority or prestige or anything like that. They don't have theories or ideas that get in the way that basically affect their sound reasoning. Okay, these people have a circumspect view, and they're constantly watching at all times, never letting their guard down. They're aware of their surroundings both physically and spiritually. Of good behavior. Let's look at this. In its primary sense, orderly, decorous, of good behavior, modest. Outline of biblical use, well arranged, seemly, and modest. This is a global statement about who they are. They're this way on stage, they're this way at work, they're this way at home, they're this way in the community. The bottom line is these people naturally have a sense of command presence. I don't think you can teach this to people. I think it's just who they are, and there's a level of giftedness that God gives these people to be able to do this. Now, I realize that command presence can be compromised by a lot of different things, and that's why this passage right here is saying that they can't have anything that would actually detract from that. With regard to decorum, outwardly, this is actually talking about their appearance, how they present themselves, all right? Do they dress the part? They're not dressing the part because they want to be the part, but they just naturally, they gravitate towards dressing the part. Okay, in today's world, when you see guys getting up there and wearing, I don't know, whatever they're wearing, skinny jeans or saggy pants, they got piercings and tattoos, they're prone to fashion and what have you. Okay, I think that this is what's actually talking about. These people are not prone to fashion, and they are well-groomed individuals. They don't have things about them that actually are a distraction or a stumbling block for people being able to listen to the word itself, all right? By nature, they act the part, and they do not engage in immature behavior. That's who these people actually are, all right? They're not engaging in behavior that would be not appropriate for a person in their position. I don't think you can actually teach this to a person. I don't think you can put a person up there and then hope they can actually grow into that. I think these people are naturally gifted in this way. And I think that this is something that is woefully lacking in a lot of leadership in the church itself. I mean, look at the youth pastors that you put up sometimes. Okay, look at the people sitting in the pastorate sometimes. You got to ask yourself the question: who was asleep at the wheel, putting these people forward as being role models, or shall we say, being representatives of the gospel itself? All right, we need to ask ourselves that question and ask why we have some of these people in these positions. So they have to be of good behavior, and they have to actually be and dress and behave the part. That's what this is talking about. Apt to teach. Basically instructive, apt to teach. Online biblical use, apt and skillful in teaching. They have an aptitude for teaching, all right? They're very gifted in instruction, or shall we say, or teaching or instructing in the word. This is one of those gifts that only God can give you, all right? If a person does not have the gift of teaching, and then that gift is not evident to everybody, that person is not qualified as an elder. This is kind of like God's stamp of approval on this person, and that he's given them the gift of teaching. It's really easy to see a person who has the gift of teaching. They get up there, they can articulate what they're stating, they can teach it in a way that people can understand it, they can answer questions, they can give reasons behind why they do what they do, they can tell you about the history of a subject or whatever. They're able to move around in it like it's their own natural language. They don't get up there and look like a bear on roller skates saying, well, we're going to have to disagree, or not answering questions or saying things, ask me afterwards or anything like that. These people are gifted at being on the spot. They're prepared. They know the subject, and they're good, very good, obviously good at communicating it. Patience, all right? Appropriate, mild, gentle, moderation, patience. Now, this would, at shall we say, first sight, indicate how they're working with other people, and I think that actually is true. And we have the outline biblical use. It says their seemings are suitable, equitable, fair, mild, and gentle. So that's explaining to us how they actually interact with other people. Okay, they are able to do what needs to be done in a fair and equitable, mild, and gentle fashion. But there's a character quality to this that I think is just as, if not even more important, in how they actually deal with people. I'm just going to read this statement. It's kind of like, this was basically me sewing together several statements in the word study that I did. So I'm just going to sew these together. Having the quality of enduring evils without murmuring or fretfulness. Sustaining afflictions of body or mind with fortitude. Calmness or Christian submission to the divine will. As a patient person, or a person of patient temper. It is followed by of before the evil endured. As patient of labor or pain, patient of heat or cold, not easily provoked, calm under the sufferance of injuries or offenses, not revengeful, persevering, constant in the pursuit of exertion, calmly diligent, not hasty, not overeager or impetuous, waiting or expecting with calmness without discontent. These people can take a beating, all right? They can take a beating and they can endure it. And they take that beating knowing that God has a purpose in that. And they can suffer that beating, and they can sit there and endure under it. That's what these people are like. These people are incredibly durable individuals in their character. Not a brawler. All right? This one kind of caught me off guard. It says peaceful, not a brawler. But look at it says commonly not to be withstood or invincible. Okay, the common understanding of this is an individual who positions themselves as being, shall we say, unresisted. Okay, a person not to be stood against. It can, and it's more rarely talking about abstaining from fighting. But the idea behind it is that this is an individual who positions themselves as an authority, whether or not they actually have that authority or not. Okay? Just because they're in that position of authority, they position themselves in such a way that, hey, I'm the authority, you have to submit, okay? And you're not going to resist me. Noah Webster refers to it as a wrangler, a person who just goes through and is going to grab hold and force people into submission purely and only based upon the position or the authority of their position, whether they actually are qualified for that position or not. That's what a brawler actually is. Not covetous. All right, the word is very simple. It means, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this word right. It's unavaricious, without covetousness, not greedy of filthy lucre. All right, it's a little bit different word than the one we had previously. Okay, not loving money, nor avaricious. The idea behind it is, according to Noah Webster, 1828, with regard to the word avaricious, it means immoderately desirous of accumulating property. Now, I would ask you to just kind of take a look around at the people who are in leadership positions at your church and even sitting on the elder boards. I would venture to say that a lot of these guys they're money guys, whether they're involved in finance or insurance or whatever else, whether they're CEOs or whatever. A lot of these guys sitting on these elder boards tend to be fairly wealthy. I remember talking to a lady a few years ago. Actually, I wasn't talking to her, I was just listening to her. And she had basically made a statement. She says, it just seems to me like there's a disproportionate number of people sitting on our elder boards who are essentially money guys. And if you were to actually look at some of these boards, you would ask yourself the question, where's the school teacher? Where's the auto mechanic? Where's the banker, the bank teller or the grocery store clerk or whatever? It would seem as though God basically bypassed these people for positions of being elders, and that they're just not fit for it, based on what we see in today's elder boards. The idea behind this is, folks, is that we cannot have people sitting on these boards who have all these investments and all of these properties and all of these financial obligations, and there's a reason for that. The reason is found in a previous slide where it talks about being vigilant. They cannot be vigilant if they're going to be preoccupied with, we say, their holdings and what have you. That's why you don't want these guys on the boards like this. Not a novice, a person who is newly planted, figuratively a young convert. Online biblical use, newly planted, a new convert, a neophyte, one who has recently become a Christian. This should be obvious to everybody, but it has happened in the past. It doesn't happen too often. But I think that there's another way in which it actually happens that's actually more common. You have somebody who's been sitting in the church for, umpteen years, and it's been sitting there like some lump in a log, and all of a sudden he kind of gets an awakening later on in his life. Next thing you know, within a couple of years, there he is sitting on an elder board. Okay, that's actually not uncommon to happen, but they, in a sense, they're a novice and they've not been in the game this whole time, and all of a sudden they decide they're going to get into the game, and they get into the game and they want to be the quarterback. So you just sit there and just go, look, okay, you obviously you don't want a new believer, but I think even worse, you don't want somebody who's been sitting on the sidelines the whole time, and then towards the end of the game, he wants to jump in and start running the game. You can't have people like that. That's what you refer to as a neophyte. Okay, so yeah, and here's the reason. All right, this is why you don't put a new believer in. Lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation
of the devil. It's for his own protection that you don't put a new believer in positions of eldership.
They're of a good report, okay, of them which are without. They have a good reputation with unbelievers out. I mean, they have a good reputation outside the church. All right, they have a good testimony. They have a good witness, a good record. The idea behind it is at work and at home, in their neighborhood, in their communities. Okay, outside of the place where they need to actually have to look good, outside of the church community, they're known for their Christian witness and their Christian reputation. I remember years ago, I was working with a guy down in Southern California at a small kids camp, and we were chatting for a while. And after chatting for a while, it became apparent that there was somebody that we both mutually had an experience with, and he stated that he was stunned, totally stunned, to see this individual in a leadership position at church, because he actually works with the guy. And in working with the guy, he says, I would have never guessed that he even goes to church. And then he went and actually joined a church, and then when joining that church, he sees this guy's in a leadership position. Okay, and this is the point I'm actually talking about, is that if these people don't have a record of a good testimony outside of, shall we say, the church environment, they don't have a good testimony in their neighborhood, in the community, and at work, then they're not fit as elders. And here's the reason why he's got to have a good reputation outside the church among young believers, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. All right? You do not want to have somebody who does not have a good reputation at their place of employment, in their neighborhood, and in their community, because that reputation is going to come back to the church, and he's going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to sit on that, to trying to keep it quiet, and in some cases probably even lying about it. So we don't want to have somebody that doesn't have a good reputation outside the church.
The husband of one wife. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one right here, because my next segment is going to be dealing with the whole issue of marriage and divorce and the church and what have you. And so I'm going to spend a lot of time on that particular issue in my next presentation, which will hopefully come out here in the next couple of weeks. But I do believe that this is actually telling us that the person cannot have been a divorcee. And I believe that also to be the case with regard to them even before they're being saved. That would be something that I'd be willing to shall we say, debate. But specifically as a believer, they can't have been divorced. They cannot be a divorcee and have entered into a second marriage. And the idea behind this is that it's quite complicated. There's a lot of history in here, and it would be better to actually address this particular issue in my next segment in this series. And so, but let me just say straight out here is you're talking about a person that has been married one time, as long as their wife remains alive, and they have not, been put away, and they have not put away their spouse. And I believe that's would be even prior to being saved as well. So anyway, I want to take this one here and just kind of put it on the back burner for right now and just deal with it in the next part of the series I've got. So, all right. Household. One that rules well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Okay, when you look at the word here for the issue of gravity, what it's talking about veneration. Okay, the word gravity is very direct. It's the characteristic of a thing or a person which entitles to perseverance or reverence and respect, dignity, majesty, sanctity, honor, and purity. So what's talking about is that this guy, he has the ability to manage his house and bring his children into subjection with all gravity. And the gravity that they actually have is that they have a reverence and a respect and an honor for their parents. In other words, his kids are models at submitting themselves to Exodus 20:12 when it says that they are to honor their father and their mother. Right? There is nothing about his kids that would communicate a disrespect for the father in the household. I think that this. I mean, I was once told that, as the pastor's house, so goes the church. And I have to tell you that there's a lot of pastors, a lot of elders, a lot of people in church leadership who fall woefully short in this matter. And what's kind of funny about this particular passage and the other one is that it seems like nobody ever seems to fall under this. All right, there's always a way around this. But the bottom line is that this passage is very clear, is that you have to be able to manage your household and do so in such a way that your kids are effectively submitting themselves to Exodus 20:12. But it's more than that. Let's go to this next slide here. But more than just managing his household well, he has faithful children not accused of riot or unruly. And I think it's pretty evident from the text that what's talking about faithful children, it's talking about having believing children. Now, someone's going to say, well, Brad, that's not actually fair because only God can actually save children. That is correct. And only God can give you the gift of teaching. So I think it's pretty clear that with regards to the gift of teaching, that's one way that God shows his stamp of approval on this individual. And also giving him believing children is another way that God demonstrates his stamp of approval regarding the person in question. So the idea behind it is that if they've got the gift of teaching and they have saved children that fall underneath the category of what they're looking for in saved children, then if all the other factors are in play, then this person's qualified. And if they don't have saved children, then God has not given him his stamp of approval. So we're going to look into this issue of saved children here at a little bit more length here. So let's just go ahead to our next slide. The question to ask ourselves is do our kids have to be believers? All right. I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to use a bunch of Bible translations and go through and look at how actually this has been translated over the years. We're going to be looking at some 56 modern English translations. In fact, the following is a montage of 56 English translations. The relevant words are going to be highlighted in yellow and are found in Titus 1:6, which lays out elder qualifications. And the reason why I'm doing this is not because I'm endorsing other Bible translations or whatever. I simply just want to show you the weight of the evidence that tells us that our kids, that an elder's kids actually have to be believers. All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and run this montage for you. It takes about 3 minutes to go through, and then we'll do a little bit of study at the end of it and begin to wrap this up. So anyway, here we go.
So what's our conclusion? Well, in total, we have 56 online English versions. By the way, I went to Bible Gateway and I just basically looked at each one that they had and I cut and paste straight into this presentation. Okay? We have 56 online English versions, 42 of which clearly state that an elder's children must be believers. Another 14 say they must be faithful. And it's with regard to that last statement regarding them being faithful that a lot of people want to find an escape hatch for their unbelieving child. They want to state that faithful means that they're just good kids in the home, or good kids, period, even out of the home, and they're not troublemakers or anything like that. They just don't believe. They did not continue with the faith. And I want to show you that that's actually not what the passage is actually saying.
Look at the word faithful here. Okay? Objectively trustworthy. These are trustworthy individuals. Subjectively trustful. Okay? They are trustful of that which they have been taught. They believe. They're faithful. Based on the Greek, the words believe and faithful are two sides of the same coin. Not only do these children believe, they are faithful to that belief. Here's the definition from Noah Webster, 1828, okay? It literally says, firm adherence to the truth and duties of religion. That's what faithful means. These children, they are trustworthy, they are trustful, they believe, and they are faithful to that which they believe. Okay? They have been well taught in the homes. And in that home, that which has been taught has also been modeled. They are well prepared to go out into the world and take that which they have been taught and modeled in the home and carry it into their own homes, to their own places of work, to their own churches. That's the idea here. They are the exact opposite of an apostate.
Now, of stating that they are to be believing children, believing children who are faithful, that should be enough, but it goes on to kind of narrow things down. Okay, these are children who cannot be accused of riot or being unruly. Now, let's look at the word riot here, okay? I'm not going to get into all the Greek stuff and pronunciations, but I want to look at the definitions that are coming along with this. Look at this right here, okay? What does it mean to be to riot? It has an element of unsavedness to it, okay? There's an element of being unsaved in this riotous living, all right? And then it goes on to say that there's an element of profligacy, excess, and riot. And that word profligacy right there, it's talking about an excessive amount of spending. But I want to look at this word right here, riot, okay? Let's look at the word riot as it's explained in our dictionary, Noah Webster 1828 online. Now, in the general sense, it's talking about a tumult, an uproar. Hence, technically in law, a riotous assembling of 12 persons or more and not dispersing upon proclamation, okay? This is an unlawful assembly that refuses to disperse when the authorities come in and attempt to disperse it. And that's reiterated down below where it says uproar, wild and noisy festivity. But look at this right here. It also goes on to talk about it as being excessive and expensive feasting, okay? Excessive and expensive feasting, and it equates it with what we refer to as luxury. We go on to see, it says to revel, to run to excess in feasting, drinking, or other sensual indulgences. These are people who have the ability to engage either in an unlawful assembly or the ability to party. Okay? These are unruly people, and they are what? They are also partiers.
Okay, let's go on. It says to revel, to run in excess in feasting, drinking, and other sexual indulgences. And it refers to this as luxury. Okay, it's a life of luxury. To luxuriate, to be highly excited, to banquet, to live in luxury. These people have a lot of time on their hands. They have a lot of money and resources. Okay, and they can enjoy things that other people can't necessarily enjoy. And what the apostle is stating here is that your children, okay, not only do they have to be believers and they have to be faithful believers, but they cannot engage in a lifestyle of unsavedness, profligacy, partying, luxurying, and the pursuit of luxury. All right? Now, I ask you, does that sound like someone who's, in their junior high years or their teenage years where they can actually basically be involved in that? I mean, they would be very limited in what they could be involved in. So look at the word unruly. All right, it's the idea behind it is it says that these are unsubdued people. They are insubordinate in fact or temper. All right, in their personalities, they will not submit to anybody, nor will they submit to the facts that are put right before them. They're just obstinate individuals. They are disobedient. That is, not put under. They are unruly. They refuse to submit themselves to any authority whatsoever, whether it be their parents, whether it be the civil authorities, whether it be people in church, whether it be people at work, or whatever. Whomever God has appointed over them, they refuse to submit to them in any capacity whatsoever.
I want to look at two passages here that give us an idea of how we're supposed to view our elders. The first one here is in 1 Peter 5, starting in verse 1. The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. All right, so this particular passage right here is telling us that primarily the role of the elder is to feed the flock, but not just to feed the flock, but to be an example. He's supposed to be the model citizen of what it means to be a citizen of heaven. He's supposed to be the example that we can look at and watch them as they follow Christ, and they set an example for us. Let's go to another passage here. Look at Hebrews 13:7. It says, remember them which have the rule over you, who have spoken unto you the word of God, whose faith follow, considering the end of their conversation. So what we're supposed to be able to do is we're supposed to submit ourselves to these men who are supposed to be model examples of what it means to live the Christian life, and we're supposed to watch them, and we're to take into consideration the outcome of their faith. All right, we're supposed to take that into consideration and submit ourselves to them. That's what we're supposed to be able to do. That's the whole purpose of eldership, is to serve as a model for the person in Christian living. That's what we're supposed to see in the men who are sitting on these elder boards. It's supposed to be obvious to everybody that if they fit all of the qualifications, not sort of fits, not kind of fits or whatever, but that they clearly fit all of the qualifications. It's obvious to everybody. And in fitting all the qualifications, they themselves serve as models and examples for Christian living. That's what they're supposed to be to us. In the law, there are very specific instructions, shall we say, governing who could be officiating in the capacity of the priesthood. All right. These laws, some of these instructions are very similar to what we see for elder qualifications. They couldn't be married to a divorcee. There could not be any outward defects in the person officiating in the capacity of the priesthood. They could not be engaged in any activity that would declare them to be ceremonially unclean. They could not have any inward faults either. Their children could not be profane, which is kind of a global statement, because the word profane, it literally, it has, on one end of the spectrum, it means that a person can't be vile, engaged in vile, wildly sinful behavior. But at the same time, it also implies that a child cannot be just a lump in a log, a person who has no spiritual passion or passion for the things of God either. They had to control themselves concerning wine. So there were quite a few similarities between what was required of the priesthood and what was required for eldership, and they both had the same job. They were to feed the flock of God. They were to minister the word of God to the people of God. That's what their job was. And if a priest did not meet all of these qualifications, no matter what he did, however he officiated or what he did, whatever he did, his disqualification rendered him of no effect before God. In other words, God didn't accept his service. And in the case of the high priest, that was dire, because now you didn't have a mediator for the people. So what I'm stating here is that this is not a new concept. The idea that men serving the capacity of leadership within the community of believers have to be qualified in a very specified way, and they have to actually meet the standard. Otherwise, God will not accept their service. That was true in the Old Testament, and it's true in the New Testament. So what does that say about us? Where are we today when we look at our churches and our elder boards and those officiating on behalf of God for us? Where do we stand? Well, the same goes for us, folks. If we have men serving on elder boards who don't meet the qualifications, as a church, we're just a facade. And the men sitting on those elder boards are imposters. God gave us those instructions sort of as a fence to protect the church. Those men are the fence around the church. Their job is to protect the church from ravenous wolves, false doctrines, and other things that can come outside the church into the church, and even deal with issues inside the church. But if they step right over those shall we say, instructions, and are seated in these positions of authority in the church, we have no expectation, just like in the Old Testament, we have no expectation whatsoever that God is going to accept their work and or our work. Okay? If we're voting for guys who aren't qualified and we're complicit with them, we cannot expect that God's going to give us the wisdom and the discernment to be able to deal with some of the issues that we see taking place on the national scene. And let me state this. Those people, the Ravi Zacharias and the presidents of the schools and the music leaders and the mega church pastors and so forth like that, those people are all members of a local congregation, whom I would assume has some sort of leadership that is structured sort of like what's supposed to be like we see in Timothy and Titus. I can't help but think that if I were to look at some of those churches and look inside some of those churches, you would see men sitting there who don't belong there. I spoke to a lady a while ago who did a video on some things that had happened to her in her church. And one of the things that she told me was that when it came to the elder board, the two things that were very obvious. Number one is that a lot of the guys sitting on those elder boards were businessmen. And in addition to that, a lot of them had no training biblically whatsoever with regard to sound doctrine or any level of doctrine whatsoever. And that was her elder board. And let me just state that that is more common than people realize. We cannot expect that the institutions that are out there that are basically an extension of the local church are going to be any different than what we see in the local church. The local church itself has to hold itself accountable to the biblical standard when it comes to appointing elders. And if we don't, God's not going to bless our work. In fact, he's going to kind of give us over to that. That's how the Lord judges us today. He doesn't judge by sending fire and brimstone and so forth like that, like he did in the Old Testament. What he does is that he judges us by giving us over to it. And if we have clear instructions in the scriptures telling us exactly what God requires for eldership, and we as congregates become complicit in voting for guys that senior pastors and elder boards put forward, no matter who puts them forward, if they don't meet the instructions of the scriptures, we ought not to vote for them. And it's by voting for these guys and just going along, kind of contracting out our thinking when it comes to church leadership in this issue. We contract our thinking out. We just kind of like, well, he's the pastor. You put him up there. He's the best among us. And so therefore, and when you go and investigate and look at these guys, some of these guys they're just imposters is all they are. It's just a facade is all it is. And then once they're on, it's like you can't get rid of them. So now let me just conclude with this. I would challenge you to show this video to your pastor. All right. And if you can't show it to your pastor, just go through this video and just kind of write these things down and go and study it yourself. I did it through a Blue Letter Bible. So everything I did is from online. Blue Letter Bible, King James Version. You can go ahead and look at the words yourself. Words mean things. It's not my opinion. Words mean things. All right. And and where I needed to, I went to Noah Webster 1828 online dictionary, and it's a word study. And as a result of doing this word study, we're forced to draw a certain conclusion, folks. And that conclusion is that there are very few people who actually meet the standard of being an elder, right? These guys are supposed to be models. They're supposed to be models in terms of actually understanding and being able to teach the word. They're supposed to be models with regard to their family and their children. They're supposed to be models with regard to their marriage and their wife. They're supposed to be models with regard to being a witness in the community. They're supposed to be models with regard to being a witness at work, a model with regard to doing business, engaging in business behavior. They're supposed to be models of being just and righteous and holy. They're supposed to be models with what it means to be above reproach. I mean, just think of the concept of above reproach. How many divorcees do we have sitting on our elder boards? And how many guys do we have sitting on our elder boards who have a past history of sexual sin? I mean, doesn't Proverbs tell us, I think it's Proverbs 6 or 7 tells us that if a person engages in sexual sin, they're never above reproach. Now, of course, we're talking about, as believers, okay? How many guys do we have in these positions who are in those situations? How many guys do we have sitting on these elder boards, folks, that are multimillionaires, okay? Big businessmen, big CEOs sitting in these big, huge estates and so forth. How many guys do we have doing that? All right? Just kind of look at this and look what the qualifications call for. So, well, this has been a long presentation. I know that. I would ask that you would just go through it, study it yourself, take your family through it, show it to others, and maybe even give it to your pastor and have your pastor look through it. I doubt that he's going to agree, okay? I doubt that anybody in church leadership is going to agree with this because it's very hard for people to come to this conclusion once they find themselves in these positions. But the bottom line, folks, is that we sitting here in the pews, we have an obligation to the Word. My calling and my duty is first and foremost to the Word of God, and to the extent that any pastor and any board of elders submits themselves to the Word of God and complies with these standards, man, I'm all in submission and so forth like that. You don't even have to tell me; I just will do it naturally. But I'm not going to submit to people who are going to roughshod over this and just say, well, these are the elders. We're going to put them there. They're just the best among us. And you're just going to have to go with it. I'm not doing that. All right. God did not tolerate that among the priesthood. And he's certainly not going to tolerate it among the church, which is basically also his priesthood as well. God gave us standards for a reason. It's not to run roughshod over them. All right. Well, anyway, I thank you for your time, and I look forward to doing my next video. It's going to be talking about specifically the issue of the husband of one wife and the issue of divorce, remarriage, and where we're at as a church as it relates to the what I consider the great apostasy or the falling away. Have a good day.